Hi everyone, thanks for joining. We're starting in about 3 minutes and kick it off. People are dialing in. You are all currently unmuted. We kick it off in 2 minutes. Thanks for joining. Hi everyone, thanks for joining this year's EMEIA Blockchain Summit. We are currently waiting for all people to arrive. We have muted every one of you. If you have questions, please write them in the Q&A chat. They will be answered after each section. We currently would like to introduce you to our agenda. We have speakers from all over the world. We speak about new regulations on the Swiss market, in the EMEA market, and even in China with Darko and Jeet. Coming soon up, our blockchain leader, Paul, will talk about DLTs and blockchain in public and private space. He will have a nice discussion with Simon Seiter from the German stock exchange. We will present the EY blockchain analyzer with Greg together, and we have a challenger here who is Espen, a CEO from Vakandi, who recently sold a stock exchange, a crypto asset exchange, and he will really find out if he could use the EY blockchain analyzer in the future to do his due diligence. We follow up with the EY OpsChain, which is presented by Sam, have some additional use case from Michael. After these sessions, which take 1 hour, 45 minutes, we come to our breakouts where we have a transition. You find the links in the chat. They will be shared again at 12:45. And you can see them on the next slide as well. We have 4 different breakouts for you. First of is tokenization of assets. Then we go into trust and blockchain. We talk about blockchain-based recognition in a shared economy. And in breakout 4, we have several kind of use cases that are validated with you together in a group. So kick it off. I would like to introduce to all of you now Darko and Jeet, who will speak about regulatory developments and current changes in the market. Thank you very much. Jeet and Darko, you are up.
Thank you, Franziska. I hope everybody can see and hear me. Dear ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to cover the next 10 minutes with market trends and regulatory developments in 2020, together with my friend Jeet. Before we dive into the market trends, let me ask you one question. How can you get beyond talking about blockchain and start using it? This is the main question also of today's webcast. I must confess, we're going to be talking a lot today about blockchain and distributed ledger technology, but we will also provide you with an answer on this question. Let me give you a first generic answer. As a professional football player, I will use a football analogy. You must stand on the pitch and play the game in order to become a pro. You can't become, and you cannot afford to just stand at the sideline and watch the others playing. This is really true for DLT. You must start using blockchain and DLT. With DLT, we are at the beginning. It's a niche sport today, but I believe in 10 years from today, it will get a mainstream sport. And now, let's look into the trends for blockchain and DLT. Probably the biggest trend this year, I would say, is decentral finance, or in short, DeFi. DeFi is the movement that allows users to use or utilize financial services without the need to rely on an intermediary or a centralized entity. These financial services are provided by decentralized applications, or in short, dApps. But why is this the biggest trend, you may ask yourself? Because DeFi, in my eyes, is the first real fintech disruptor. So far, fintechs have been building and maintaining front-end applications based on existing banking or similar financial services infrastructure or technology, which means and adds another intermediary, and another intermediary means somebody needs to pay for such services, which is usually the end client or consumer. So DeFi, on the other hand, strongly focuses on technology, so on the use of distributed ledger technology. It is not introducing another intermediary, but it gets rid of certain intermediaries that are players today. So, although that the current dApps or DeFi applications currently focus on cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ether, etc., the real power of these dApps lies in the application to traditional financial instruments, which is already a live use case for many of them. This is why I truly believe that DeFi, respectively the underlying distributed ledger technology, will replace most IT applications in the financial services world. And maybe as a side effect, will also squeeze out some of the intermediaries that play a role already today. Another trend, which is currently heavily debated in Europe and is most relevant for all of us in EMEIA, are central bank issued digital currencies, or in short, CBDCs. In China, for example, I see my video is not working. In China, for example, this is not a trend, but this is reality. This means for Europe that it has to speed up in order to catch up with China, which I believe is approximately 7 years ahead of Europe. So stop talking and debating, start using it. And now I'd like to switch to the last part of my slot and talk about the regulatory trends in Switzerland. I promise it's going to be short. As initially said, we want to focus on using blockchain and not on talking about it. So very quickly, almost a year ago, end of November last year, the Swiss Federal Council adopted a dispatch regarding the further improvement of the framework conditions for distributed ledger technology and blockchain. End of September this year, the Swiss Parliament approved this framework. 2 weeks ago exactly, the consultation process on the underlying blanket ordinance, which has more detailed articles, has kicked off and will last until February next year. This means, and my expectation is that in summer 21, these amendments will come into force. And with that, I hope that Switzerland will become a prime global hub and viable location for DLT companies. This speed of this legislative process has never been seen before in Switzerland and shows the importance of this technology for Switzerland. But now, let me give you a quick overview on the major changes. First of all, we are creating a qualified book entry security by way of electronic registration. Such electronic registration may happen on distributed ledger technology as one example and use case. Second, digital assets and data can be segregated in the event of a bankruptcy, which is new. Thirdly, we are creating a new type of license for DLT trading systems. Such license will permit services in the area of trading, settlement, and custody, not only for regulated financial market players, but also for private retail individuals. All these changes will happen on already existing acts, and this will bring more legal certainty in Switzerland for DLT companies and their use cases, which at the end will lead to more innovation in financial Switzerland all over in financial services in Switzerland and Europe. And now I'm very pleased to hand over to my colleague Jeet, which traveled all the way down from London to lovely Zurich today, virtually, to give his view from Europe. Thanks, Jeet.
Well, thank you, Darko, and great to be here with everybody virtually. And I do realize the irony of someone from the UK speaking about the EU on a Swiss conference. But I think it's really important for us to reflect a little bit just on the EU proposed regulations for a few minutes. And for those of you who may not have digested the 200 or so odd pages that have come out yet. Personally, I think it was always going to be a chicken or an egg problem. Do you get the regulatory framework to drive the innovation agenda, or do you get the innovation agenda to drive the regulatory framework? And personally, as an auditor, at heart, I think the EU has done the right thing, actually, by setting out its draft proposals for the regulation as it enters what the EU is calling the digital decade. But please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I agree with everything that has been proposed, but I think it is an important step for firms to have that regulatory framework that is going to be consistent across Europe to de-risk the innovation and the investment that firms are going to put into place. I mean, there's always talk about, there shouldn't really be economies of scale in the digital space, but I think when you look at things like return on investment as well as risk tolerance, then it's important for firms to have that sort of legal certainty. And so I'm really pleased to see the EU tackle this via its four pillars, which they've set out, which is the first one being tackling fragmentation in the digital single market. The second one, setting up an EU regulatory framework to facilitate digital innovation. The third one about creating an EU financial data space. And the fourth one about addressing new challenges and risks as they arise to create new opportunities, but as well, and in my mind, really key, to protect customers. And going back to my opening line, to me, I believe legal certainty is key, very much in what Darko has also just mentioned about the Swiss legislative framework that we've seen coming up. And I think that is, and I hope other countries as well will continue to reflect and consider the EU's leadership in this space. And the EU's approach, though, is really wide-ranging. It takes in market integrity, it takes in financial stability, it takes in monetary sovereignty. And I think, I'm going to stick my neck out a little bit and say I'm inclined to agree with the view the EU has set out that similar risks should be regulated in a similar manner. And why shouldn't digital assets custodians not have the same requirements, for example, of asset segregation or prudential regulation as fiat currencies and banks, with the potential impact to the monetary system? But this isn't a summit on the proposed new regulation, so I'm going to quickly step aside so we can move on, as there's a lot to talk about and discuss. But do look out very shortly on our thought leadership that we'll be sharing in this space soon. So back over to you, Francesca, as we go to the next session.
Gee, Darko, thank you very much. I think this was very interesting and so much more to talk about. I would like to hand over to Paul, who would give us now his keynote speech on the EY global strategy and his vision around blockchain, not only public ones, but also private ones. Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Francesca. So hi, everybody. I'm Paul Brody. I'm the global blockchain leader. I am delighted to be almost here with you today in person. I came all the way to Europe, but thanks to lockdowns and quarantine restrictions, I'm here in the UK and probably not going much further until I go home. That being said, it's a delight to be here. I have to say, I am jealous of the European time zones. They get the best time zones around the world. They get the best opportunities for dealing with Europe, Asia, and the US all in the same day. But that's not my topic today. I want to talk about kind of our vision of blockchain going forward, how we see it having a substantial impact on the enterprise over the coming years, and where EY is making our priorities from the investment standpoint. We've already heard from two of our excellent leaders, and we're going to hear more today about diving into the products that we've built and the solutions that we're working on. And what I would like to do is to lay all of these out in something of a holistic framework about how we think about blockchain. At the end of the day, we can't be both an auditor of the same clients and a regular service provider or software provider. However, we try to think about both of these as if we could be, because we want to understand if we are going to do a solution for one of our advisory or consulting clients, how would an auditor, any auditor, think about it? How would we make sure it's safe? How would we understand the analytics? How would we follow where the money went? And if we're an auditor, we want to think about, you know, what any of our other clients are doing and how we would be prepared to support them over time. With that said, let me dive into our slides, because we wouldn't be a consulting organization to at least some degree if we didn't spend lots of time talking with slides. But I'll try to make it quick and interesting, or at the very least, quick. I think we will look back on 2020 as a really transitional and fundamentally kind of pivotal year in the history of blockchain when it comes to accepting digital assets and blockchain technology. This is probably, broadly speaking, true of almost every digital space, but I think in particular, blockchain will be a breakthrough over the course of this year. To start with, as Darko referred to, in China, we have the Digital Currency Electronic Payment Program launched. Now, DCEP is not a blockchain, but it is a tokenized digital currency. It's the world's first central bank issued tokenized digital currency, and consequently, it's going to have a huge impact on people's readiness and acceptance of digital assets. Secondly, we're seeing some enormous allocations by some of the world's bigger enterprises in digital assets. And I'm thinking of a couple of companies here that have very publicly come out and said that they are going to allocate a portion of their enterprise treasury to Bitcoin and potentially other digital assets. This is a path I expect to see accelerating. It always takes one or two companies to blaze a trail, and then others tend to follow quickly. Private investors, family offices, hedge funds were already doing this. So this represents a further step forward in the acceptance of digital assets. The European Crypto Framework, which my colleague G talked about, is another important milestone, as well as the legislation that's going on in Switzerland. All over the world, the regulatory environment is catching up with the technological environment. And this is a good thing, because although there are lots of pioneers that are willing to take the risk, the majority of the money, of the innovation, of the assets that are out there won't follow until there's a bit more regulatory certainty, and we're getting there. And it's far from perfect, but we are moving in the right direction. And then finally, we're seeing the triumph of public blockchains. So around the world, there is a growing recognition that private blockchains may have been a very good idea, but the reality is they did not scale up very well, not from a technical standpoint, but from the view of how to get other business partners to work with you. And now that it's possible for multiple companies to work in the same environment, the same blockchain, in this case, public Ethereum, but with privacy, thanks to some of the work that we've been doing and others, it's a different game altogether. And I would think about it as the shift when the internet was unencrypted and people were reluctant to use it because we did not know if our data was being tracked, to when the internet started to widely accept encryption technology. And then it was really possible to start to have significant and accelerated investment in crypto, or excuse me, in e-commerce and other assets. We are going to see the same process go on in the public Ethereum blockchain. The real world measures of investment and adoption are strong, maybe not quite as heated as they were in 2017 or 2018, but both when you look at it from an industry perspective, from a government perspective, if you look at the operational data from the Ethereum public blockchain itself, the numbers are substantial. The user base, the volume of transactions, the investment in systems and solutions, the shift of government viewpoints, they're all evidence of significant real world investment in this technology. We're seeing the same thing inside of EY. So more and more customer and solutions are adopting blockchain for verifiable enterprise purposes. And very importantly in this process, we've seen a big shift to this year from a couple of years ago, where a lot of the investment was, hey, I heard blockchain is cool. I really want to be a part of it. Get me one of them. Now what we see is much more concentration around a repeatable set of value propositions that make sense and can scale up. And so that's why you'll see so much investment in food and beverage traceability, drug and medical supply chain, digital supply chain, shipping and logistics, even what I would call the financial supply chain. The traceability of assets across enterprise boundaries is going to be the foundation of blockchain scaling up across the world. And even though the pace is not quite as heated as it was a couple of years ago, the number of projects we're doing, the number of clients that we have, the volume solution implementations tells us that enterprise adoption of this technology is accelerating. There are in my mind, two key kind of events that take place that are really going to drive innovation and utilization. The first is the programmability of applications and tokens. And then secondly, the digital transformation of enterprises more broadly, because enterprises and governments are being forced this year in particular to significantly speed up their digital transformation. And the result is going to be a faster adoption of these newer technologies. Let me start with programmability, and in particular, the world of DeFi, which my colleague Darko referred to at the beginning of today's discussion. DeFi, decentralized finance, is an important milestone because it starts to transition from having stuff, having digital assets, right, which is what a lot of early smart contracts did, to doing stuff. Most of the world's early smart contracts, I think it's a little flattering them to call them very smart. They tended to do things like behave like basic securities, keep a register of participants, and occasionally allow for voting on governance issues. But that's kind of all that they did. DeFi, the big transition of DeFi, the big value proposition of DeFi isn't just a financial services component, although I believe it's very, very important. The value proposition of DeFi is around the fact that it's truly programmable smart contracts that allow you to do things with your digital assets. So you can transfer an asset or put an asset into a DeFi smart contract, and that contract in turn can lend that asset out. It can arrange for leasing, it can pay interest on the investment you've made, it can insure those assets. In short order, we have smart contracts that are doing stuff with smart assets, and that is by itself already a substantial milestone. Now, DeFi is not ready for the enterprise, right? It's still entirely public. There's no privacy infrastructure around DeFi today. The programmability remains relatively immature, which is why you see these eye-watering hacks and thefts and flash crashes from time to time. And it's almost entirely limited to financial services, which isn't always kind of how large enterprises want to transact with each other. But the principle is there. We have programmable assets doing smart things together. And as these things mature, they will mature with privacy, they will mature with greater security, and they will become adoptable and usable by enterprises. Enterprises need this. They need programmable environments because the truth is their investments in ERP have not delivered all of the returns that they are possible to, that they should be able to achieve. And that has to do with a bunch of different issues, but probably the key one is the fact that collaborating across enterprise boundaries remains extremely difficult. If you look at the accelerated maturity of enterprise technology over the last 30 years, an enormous amount has been accomplished. When I first got into the software business, companies were still on their first round of ERP implementation. They already had digital manufacturing systems, and they were also starting to implement advanced planning and scheduling things, tools like forecasting, and eventually on top of that, they started layering analytics and machine learning tools across their entire environment. So enterprises have become much more sophisticated, but the minute they want to transact with another enterprise, they suddenly go all the way back to emailing around PDF files or spreadsheets and then scanning them in or manually entering them. So all of this maturity, process, analytics, shared data, it goes away the minute you cross enterprise boundaries. Even though enterprises really need that collaboration, if anything, they need it now more than they did 30 years ago. Most large companies aren't really running their own business. They are part of an ecosystem. If you got delivery of a fancy new smartphone last week, the company whose name was on it probably didn't actually manufacture it. They designed it, they arranged all the procurement, they managed all the logistics, and they had to keep track of everything in the process, but they probably themselves did not do the actual manufacturing. That is how kind of mature digital ecosystems operate. And we will see more and more of this as we go forward, right? We believe the value proposition of public blockchains is that they will do for business ecosystems, they will provide this shared set of facts and shared business logic across multiple parties, what ERP did inside the enterprise. Now it's fair, you should ask when I make a statement like this, why? Why would we use blockchain? Because the truth is, as my mother, who was a mainframe software developer in the 1960s, in Switzerland, actually at CERN, where my father was a physicist, my mother would like to remind me that anything you can do on a blockchain can also be done on a mainframe or a centralized server. So what's the point? The point is that any solution other than a blockchain, especially a public blockchain, results in the centralized infrastructure operator, whether they are the private blockchain operator or the marketplace operator, becoming extraordinarily powerful. Access to that flow of data, the ability to control who can join the network or not, ultimately makes those marketplace operators or private blockchain operators too powerful to really be trusted. They can never resist the temptation to make use of that power. Whereas in a public blockchain environment, we're all operating on a level playing field with transparent rules and access for all the participants. So in light of that, why would you take the chance, the risk of creating a powerful centralized monopoly, and instead you would prefer, as I think many companies ultimately will as this technology becomes easier to use, to make use of and engage with public blockchains for that business-to-business integration? Ultimately, I believe it'll be possible for companies to model literally almost every business transaction that exists between two parties or three parties or however many parties using a combination of tokens and smart contracts, right? Almost every company that interacts with each other, their interaction basically consists of, I have money, you have stuff, and we're going to exchange those items subject to the rules of an agreement. Well, the stuff, whether it's money, real or virtual, or anything else, can be represented as tokens. And the rules of the exchange, both legally and business process-wise, can be represented as smart contracts. So with those two alone, you can pretty much model any process. And when you throw in analytics, you have the ability to manage, understand, and track that process. In the end, therefore, I don't think there's any business process that involves more than one company that doesn't ultimately end up modeled and implemented on a blockchain. However, it's not necessarily going to go that way instantaneously. It's going to take time. And so I believe over time, we will see some gradual uptake by industry or use case. At EY, we've prioritized 3 areas initially where we think blockchain will have the biggest and fastest impact. As I said before, it's not that we're limiting to these areas, but I think that they're the ones where we'll see rapid impact. The first, obviously, is financial service. It's already there. It's having a big impact. Digital assets and payments, financial forensics, smart contract, right, and smart contract security, financial statement audits, which is probably our single largest business at blockchain and EY, and of course, taxation as a result of those transactions. The second big opportunity for us is the digitization of physical and digital supply chains. For us, that really means procurement, and I'll talk a little bit more about procurement later, because I believe for industrial applications, it's going to be the killer app. And then asset management, traceability, global trade, right? All the things that are required to take any kind of supply chain, whether it's a digital supply chain or a physical supply chain, and model it and execute it properly and at scale. And then finally, public service administration. So we are living in an era of massive, massive government spending as a result of stimulus programs and global funding of donor initiatives. And we're also struggling with how to achieve accountability, transparency, and fight against corruption. And blockchain has an important and useful role there to play. And it's one that I'm really proud about, the fact that we at EY are investing heavily in this space. For today's discussion, for the rest of my conversation, I want to drill a little bit into the physical and digital supply chain to start with, and then from there broaden that out to a little bit of a discussion about the impact on financial services and other segments of the industry. Blockchain-based integration holds the promise of knitting together incredibly extended global business networks, right? And they're best understood with a physical model, but the truth is it also can apply to almost any kind of digital model as well, right? As we move product around, it becomes hard to keep track of. How do we know that our products are made with conflict-free minerals, right? When the manufacturing of those minerals or the mining of those minerals took place 5 steps back in the supply chain. The answer is, through blockchain-based tokenization, you can actually keep track of inputs all the way from start to finish in the process, from the manufacturing through the transportation, warehousing, logistics, sales, and support. With smart contracts, we can knit together all of the business processes that line up those participants as well. Now, is this useful? Can we have a big impact? Because to be honest, much of this stuff is already done in a largely manual, or let's not say paper-based, but let's say spreadsheet-based way today. The answer, I believe, is yes, right? And a good example is the kind of enormous complexity that comes when you run a business network and you're trying to do buying, procurement, just one example, on behalf of that business network. If you think about the network leaders, they want to enable procurement on behalf of all their partners. Some of those are wholly owned subsidiaries, which they are periodically buying and selling, and some of those are authorized business partners. They could be a subcontractor who's authorized to buy on your behalf. They could be an authorized distributor or seller. You're part of a network, right? And you're either the network leader or you're part of somebody else's network. Network leaders that try to engage in network-wide business transactions struggle to run those from inside the 4 walls of their systems, because if you have subsidiaries and partners who are not on your ERP system, how are you going to keep track of your total volume purchased, right? Your aggregated spend, your correct pricing. If your price goes down every time you hit a volume threshold, how do you know when you're there? It turns out it is possible, but very difficult to do at the network level unless you use a blockchain. And same for keeping track of all your authorized buyers and sellers. We built EY OpsChain network procurement as a tool to do precisely that, to enable the reliable operation of simple agreements like procurement with discounts and rebates across a business network. Now, how well does this pay off? I would argue it pays off extremely well. And I would use as a case example the work we have done with Microsoft on the Xbox video game network. Now, with Microsoft, what we have done is work with them to develop a smart contract infrastructure that moves the traditional paper-based contracts, well, PDF-based contracts in the Xbox network into digital smart contracts. Now, this doesn't even include really fancy services. It doesn't extend to a massive network of multiple tiers. It's just between Microsoft and their 3,000 business partners. But the ROI on this is tremendous. And I'll just give you a few great data points from the work we've done so far. 99% reduction in cycle time. We've literally gone from 45 days to under 4 minutes to produce account statements. And instead of account statements being something that you get once a month that are 45 days old, they are up to the minute, right, in terms of current status and revenue recognition. The whole process, including the work required to build this blockchain and convert all of these paper-based contracts into smart contracts, is going to cost about half of the current operating cost. And it is a much more transparent, reliable, and trustworthy system, in large part because business participants can see how the rules are applied as transactions flow through the system. And if there are problems, they tend to get flagged much more quickly than in the old days. I've talked about modeling a process like procurement. Let me take a moment and talk about analytics, because if we want to model processes, we also need to be able to manage them very effectively. And this is an area where we've made an enormous investment in our technology, both for our assurance, our audit users, as well as for members of the public. And we have built out a forensic grade digital visualization tool, first for the Bitcoin blockchain, but it will follow for other ones as well. Our Block Explorer allows people to follow transactions through the network and to actually visualize them and export data so that they can show how an asset, whether it's a digital asset or a financial asset or a physical asset, has moved through a supply chain or a business network. In addition to that, we've invested a great deal of money in security for public blockchain-based smart contracts. And our smart contract review tool actually does all the things you'd expect to do. It talks about security, it looks at quality, it looks at code efficiently, but very importantly, it also looks at code functionality. We are still in the early days, but we are headed towards a world where standardized contracts will govern many of these. And the reason that we will use standardized contracts is because they have the lowest possible risk of new surprises in them. And so you want to know, for example, does your standardized smart contract adhere to the ERC20 standard? Does it adhere to the ERC 721 or 1155? If your smart contract says that the seller will never issue more than, say, 100,000 of this unit, is that reflected in the code? Our smart contract review tool will help you understand whether or not that's the case. If we look forward to a world where most business contracts are digital smart contracts, then we also need to think about a world where most people are still not software developers, but they need to be able to understand what's actually going on in the smart contract. Most importantly, everything that we are doing is built on public domain software and open source standards with a big focus on privacy and regulatory compliance. This is kind of the heart of the solution set that we're building. So open standards are everywhere. Public blockchains are the kind of core of what we do. And the goal here is to make sure that not only you have a choice of many different potential partners to onboard, but you also are never subject to the risk of predatory intermediaries. You have lower costs and you have higher integrity in the overall solution. Now, I encourage you to go and try many of these services. They are available at blockchain.ey.com. And while enterprise deals take time to sign up, you can sign up as an individual user to kind of get a sense of how things are operating. I want to finish up with a couple of thoughts about where the world is headed and how long it's going to take to get there. Financial services are the start of blockchain, right? They started with Bitcoin. With DeFi, they've gotten very mature and they're really accelerating. So if you think about a business process, financial services already exist at almost every step of this process, and many of them are now available on blockchain. But we should not stop at the concept of decentralized financial services applications. Business process tools like procurement, manufacturing operations, replenishment planning, sales contracting. We can put all of those as decentralized applications onto public blockchain to allow companies to operate as networks. Same for the operational capacity itself. Why shouldn't you be able to book air freight capacity or warehouse capacity as a digital token using a smart contract, right? The possibility for the tokenization and the automation of business process is tremendous. And I use kind of the Lego concept because I really want to share this idea of the ability of companies to snap together their business process in the future. How long is this going to take? The answer from my perspective is about a decade, right? Consumers are fast adopters and startups are rapid innovators, but larger enterprises can't follow that quickly, right? That 20,000 word contract that you clicked accept on in order to log into this webinar, enterprises get a squad of lawyers to make sure that you can actually agree to that and whether they can live with that terms of that agreement. And the ramp up of AWS is a really good example. It was launched in 2006. And right away, a bunch of startups adopted it. Individuals thought it was great. It'll help companies ramp up significantly. But it took about a decade from the launch time until 2017, when the world's largest companies on average started moving the majority of their new, not existing, but new software implementations to the cloud. So my own forecast is that we are now in 2020. By 2030, 50%, we'll just be crossing the midpoint, 50% of all new business contracts will be implemented on public blockchains. So that's it for me. I'm going to end my slide sharing, and I believe we are honored to have a challenger who is going to ask me easy questions that are very flattering. I believe that's the deal that we have.
Thank you very much, Paul. Yeah, we have Simon in the line. Simon is basically the head of digital assets working for the German Stock Exchange. And of course, he has a different view on public and private when it comes down to digital assets in particular. Simon, are you in the call?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I hope you can see me.
Yeah, we can.
Perfect.
You got a fancy background too.
Yeah, that's the advantage of the finance part, right? So that's actually the trading floor where people used to trade physically, but nowadays it's more of a museum. Yeah.
So Simon, I'm told you got some easy questions for me.
Oh, I'm gonna try to do it as easy as possible. So at first, many thanks for this very good talk. And first, I also highly agree that public blockchains could be also something like a next step as a cross company ERP system, basically, because they hold single point of truth for assets. But I think actually that for financial assets, it might be a bit different. Because if you look at it from today's world, I think you can see that most financial transactions themselves are being done in private networks. So SWIFT, for example, SEPA for payments, T2S for security settlement. And question would be why you think this is different for this new technology.
So I think it's a question of path dependency. So this technology did not exist when SWIFT and those other solutions were built. So they were built as centralized, kind of globally governed infrastructure. I think that, and I don't believe, one of the things I do believe is that we don't go back and successfully rip up stuff that already exists if it's working just fine. So I don't see those as kind of moving, but I do see new applications running in a decentralized environment now that it's available.
And if you look at some mechanisms from the market, do you think that public blockchains could provide this really in a similar way? Because, for example, in financial services, you have to make sure that the ones who are acting on a specific wallet or node are actually the persons that are also legally allowed to do that. How would you solve that? And if you solve it in a specific way, why is this different from a permissioned approach?
So the beauty of public blockchains is that they accommodate both a kind of permissioned infrastructure and a permissionless one. And the analogy I would give you is to the internet itself. The internet is a public permissionless network. But on this public permissionless network, we have kind of two sets of ecosystems that coexist peacefully, or usually peacefully. You have this sort of more permission type of ecosystem. Think about the structured global e-commerce system, where we have security certificates from a limited number of parties and a limited number of kind of payment APIs. And then we have this permissionless ecosystem where we get all kinds of newcomers into this environment. The internet accommodates both, and the beauty of the public blockchains is that they can accommodate the same kind of blend. So we can have permissioned controlled sub-environments in this infrastructure, as well as sort of a little bit of permissionless innovative anarchy as well.
And do you think, if you now look at the market as you have scheduled it out completely rightfully, that you have some maybe larger platforms that actually also have network power because they centralize network power to some extent? Isn't then maybe just the case that this is possible in a public chain as well? Because basically all these kind of different platforms today run on IP protocol still?
Right, and I do see a lot of integration likely to happen between these. You know, we have already kind of a lot of integration that's being built up, and some of it will be very cleverly architected decentralized things like what Chainlink does, but some of it's just going to have to be, if you want to trust a particular shipping company that they have delivered your product, there is no 25 different data sources, there's only one, so you're going to need to trust that company and perhaps have other tools like audit or SOC reporting. So it'll be a blend of permissioned and permissionless, but I believe the underlying architecture being permissionless will be more conducive to innovation and expansion than a permissioned and centralized system.
And what role do you foresee for, in general, then maybe not network operators, but operators of permissioned areas within public chains?
I think the operators in permissioned areas in public chains are going to bring their business reputation and some of their skills into this environment. So, for example, EY is an audit firm, and we have a reputation for being able to assess the security risks or the validity of certain data. And so our job in the future, a big part of our job in the future, may be authentication and validation into this environment, and thereby saving everybody else the time of having to validate some of these things.
All right, many thanks, Paul.
Oh, no, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, and thanks for going easy on me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. That's very cool. Yeah, Paul was really a little bit concerned if you ask tricky questions, so we are really happy that they were interesting for everyone. We are also currently answering a lot of questions in the chat. Everyone who's listening in, you can always write them. If we cannot answer them now, we will have a session in the end. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everyone so far. I hope you enjoy it. We go over to an interesting session now presented by Greg. Greg will give you some insights on our EY blockchain analyzer and what really happens on the blockchain in there. So we'll also show you the tool. And he will have a discussion with Espen later on. Greg, I hand over to you now.
Okay, perfect. Hi all, it's Craig Farrell, part of the Global Blockchain Lab based in London. And today we will be showcasing the Blockchain Analyzer Explorer and Visualizer, and talking you through how that allows you to analyze and deep dive into the Bitcoin data. So what I will do is I'll start with a slide just to showcase the product suite that we have of the analyzer, and then I will take you through the demo. So as you can see on screen here, I'll start from left to right, and at the far left we have the EY blockchain analyzer for public networks. And I always like to start with the problem which the products solve. So for example, the far left product allows you to reconcile off-chain and on-chain data. And the tool on the far left is used for deployed to our EY audit teams, but you can also see how it could be used for a wide range of uses for our non-audit clients, where they have the problem where they want to be able to check that their off-chain data matches the on-chain data to ensure consistency. Then on the second one along, we have the Explorer and Visualizer, which I will be jumping into a live demo of just after this, and we will show you case how you can explore the data, analyze it, and visualize the data as well for Bitcoin. Then we move along again, and this is the EY Blockchain Analyzer tax calculator, and hopefully this is relatively self-explanatory, but this supports the tax calculation for cryptocurrency trades, and currently today that supports the US tax rules, but we're looking to expand the tax rules further and build out more global functionality as the product evolves. And then finally, on the far right, I know Paul mentioned it earlier in the keynote speech, this is the smart contract and token review tool that allows you to scan your smart contract and ensure that it's compliant with the ERC20 standards. So I always like to lay out the product suite to start, and then I will jump into the Explorer and Visualizer right now. So I'll just share my screen. And there we go. So this is the platform that Paul mentioned at the start, and this is on blockchain.ey.com, and this is live. And what we're able to do here is drop down the products, and as you can see there, we've got the products that are live, including the EY OpsChain Network Procurement, and then 2 of the products on the EY Blockchain Analyzer, which is the Smart Contract Token Review Tool, and the Explorer and Visualizer, which we'll be jumping in today. So as you can see here, we land upon a product page, and then we can start here, and this will open up the application. So as we open up the application, as you can see, it's loading, and what we are able to see here is a network summary. So the way that we've designed the tool is to bubble up some of the key information to the top and present it as soon as you load the page. And in this case here, we've got some of the key information that we like to show and we believe very beneficial for users at the start. For example, the number of blocks, the total transactions that are on chain, the size of the blockchain, the mempool memory usage, and all of that key information that we think is valuable. Then we show here the recent blocks, and we've got the top 10 latest blocks that have come into the blockchain. And of course, this is connected to a live version of the Bitcoin node. So we're able to pull in that data as soon as the blocks are confirmed. So what we'll do is we'll look into a block, and we'll take block 500,000 for the purposes of the demo, and it's just loading here. And as you can see, as it loads, we're able to see the transactions that are associated with the block. So very traditional way of exploring the data. But the key here is, of course, we have customized the UX and UI so that we're able to hide and expand and explore the data very easily. As you can see here, I'm just expanding these and they load. So we've spent a lot of time on the UX and UI because, of course, there is a lot of data to present. And as you can see here, we spent a lot of time on that. So as we go further, what I will do is I will take a transaction, and what this will do is this will load the transaction. And same applies at a block level and a transaction level, as you can see here. But what I would like to do is spend the time on the visualization of the transaction, because we really feel this is the key feature and functionality of the product. Reason being is because having worked with the global forensics teams at EY, I can see the value here for a forensics team, or even for just a team that requires a way of visualizing the transactions. So what we have here is we have a custom visualization tool, and what we're able to do is expand the addresses and see exactly what happened after. And as Paul mentioned in his keynote, he had a slide where this has been expanded. And as you can see here, you can continue to load this up. And what this will do is this will continue to show you the journey. And I'll just zoom out there so you can see it. So what we have here is essentially a tool that looks at the Bitcoin data, turns it into a custom visualization, as you can see on screen here, and allows you to navigate through essentially what happened and look at the history of that transaction or that address. And what we have here is we have a legend that explains exactly what all the color palette is here. So for example, we've got the square green circles, and they are your addresses, your wallet addresses, and then we have the circles that are blue, which are the transactions. Now, what you can see here clearly is that if you were trying to perform an investigation or look at how the data had moved through the blockchain, it would be extremely difficult to look at just this raw data. And I can speak from experience, having worked with on some investigations and some forensics investigations. It can get quite, the amount of data can get quite large quite quickly. So the key purpose of this tool is to really ensure that we can streamline that and make it much easier to navigate through. And as you can see, you can continue to go through this and expand them. So what we have here is we have some fun tool tips and useful tool tips that we believe can really add value to this. For example, when you click the path mode, that will show exactly where I've clicked in the history. And obviously you can imagine as you grow this and as you expand this and as the history grows, you can obviously highlight exactly where you have clicked. I zoomed out earlier, that's a global view, but as you can see, you can zoom in and out very easily. And then we also have another feature, which is obviously export, and we can take this straight out to JPEG, and then it may be the case that you want to take this visualization offline and make some notes and deep dive into the data offline further if required. And then of course, any of these transactions or addresses, you can drill down into further, and the details panel will open up on the left-hand side, and then you can look at exactly all of the finer details related to that transaction, and the same applies to the wallet. Now, as also Paul mentioned at the start as well, that you can see how this could be, whilst this is Bitcoin today, that's where we wanted to start. But obviously you can imagine how this could be used for any type of data, whether it's cryptocurrency or non-cryptocurrency data. So for example, if it's a supply chain data, you could imagine how this could be applied there. And in that case, you would replace the square green circles to your vendors or your suppliers, and you could see how the package has moved through the supply chain, and ultimately you know, help with the visualization of that process, because as we all know, there's typically a lot of data within blockchains, and half the battle is being able to visualize it in an easy digestible format, and this was our sole purpose here. So happy to hand it over to Magnus, who I understand is going to facilitate some of the questions here related to this product.
Sure, if Magnus is ready to ask the questions. Espen, are you in the call?
Yes, I am.
How's it going? How is it in Africa?
Well, we just had a presidential election here, so internet is a little up and down. So
all right, very good. Cool, thanks for joining. Maybe I jump in. We have basically asked you to listen in, and also from your perspective, recently sold a kind of crypto exchange. Maybe quickly introduce yourself, Espen. We have prepared some questions, but maybe you have already some regarding the blockchain analyzer so far.
Yeah, so a quick introduction from me, Espen Kvelland. I currently run a company called Wakandi Group AS. We're a Norwegian fintech company. I also started Akeo about 9 years ago. We were been really one of the, can I say, early adapters of blockchain in customer projects. So we have done quite a lot project, both on public blockchain and private blockchain. Been working with a great team in Norway, also from EY, on some of them. So yeah, and one of these projects ended up into the company I'm currently running, Wakandi, where we are targeting people that are outside of the financial system in Africa. So currently we are going live in 3 different countries, Tanzania, South Africa, and Gambia in the coming 4 months. So it's a lot to do. So nice to have a small break with you guys, actually.
Sounds very interesting, yeah, excellent. So Espen, you have now got kind of an introduction like everyone else from our colleague Greg regarding the blockchain analyzer. What do you think about the tool so far?
Well, first of all, I think it's great that that EY takes a role in this space, and also that you can say build upon that trend with open source, giving away and seeing the value of what you get back by giving away stuff. So first of all, I really want to say that's great for the ecosystem. I'm very much involved in a lot of these systems, so we need better tools. And I also think it's, you know, me as a tech guy, when I go into discussions with the legal part of the project, it's very good to have some common ground that we can start off with. For example, the analyzer, you know, the smart contract analyzer that you guys are working on. So for the future, I think this is really great because you can kind of get a common knowledge together, a common platform to base the discussion on. So I'm really eager to see where this is going for you guys.
Regarding your kind of due diligence you have recently done with the company you have sold, could you imagine in the future people would use the EY blockchain analyzer doing things like this?
Well, absolutely. As you mentioned, we recently sold a licensed crypto asset exchange in Norway. The buying company were a public traded company. So I was very nervous about the due diligence process. You know, going into every old transaction. It's quite a lot of history. So a tool like this could, you know, very easily help us with this. For example, having a CSV file, a text file to upload and go through these transactions, see if we have any flagged wallets. So also for live integrations, you know, I'm building this stuff. I'm building exchanges. So to have better tooling, to be able to do an API call and get back if there are certain wallets that are flagged, stuff like that. That's absolutely great tools.
Very good. And maybe a question also to Greg. If you would give us maybe the possibility to elaborate a little bit on how the blockchain analyzer can drive efficiency or improvements and also trust into our day-to-day operations, maybe also towards Espen and his business. How would you argument, Greg?
Yeah, exactly, and exactly what Aspen mentioned. I mean, you know, the tool set that we have now, it really depends on exactly what your challenge is. So, for example, if Aspen mentioned, you know, he wants to detect, you know, red flags with his data that he's got, then absolutely the analyzer is built for that, where you can put in the, as he mentioned, the CSV, and it can look at the transactions and ensure that they occurred on the public ledger. And if so, then that's great. If there's any anomalies in the data, then the analyzer will you know, trigger a red flag. But if at the same token, if you would like to, you know, look at exactly what happened in the history of those transactions on chain, then you can use the Explorer and Visualizer. And then, of course, we've got the tax and the smart contract tool. So we really wanted to cover all the bases, essentially, when looking at, you know, the data and helping businesses. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions from the two of you, but I think there's something you potentially could easily connect. I know you have met each other already before, a very short moment, and hope you can continue the discussion. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you, guys. So 12:02, still some time left, and now we have a very nice, interesting session with Sam. I'm happy to introduce you to Samuel Davis, who is talking today with you about our EY OpsChain framework overall in the industry. He has specific topics to share with you, and we have a use case example with Michael Schramm in the end of this session coming up. Sam, I'm handing over to you now.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Hello everybody, my name's Sam Davis and I'm technical lead for blockchain here in EMEIA. As part of my job as well, I'm our deputy chief product owner, with Paul Brody being our chief product owner. We just had a very interesting discussion from Craig, where he has gone through one of our core products, the analyzer tool. And as my role as a product owner, we look to implement our product vision across our products. So if I could go to the next slide, please, Michael. This is one of our core visions, our core product visions that Paul has set. We are looking for privacy, security, regulatory compliant smart contracts, payment in fiat currencies, and running on public blockchains. So we want to develop blockchain products, blockchain applications, which will allow our customers, allow our clients to do this. And in order to help us do this, we've developed two things. The first is OpsChain, and then the second is blockchain.ey.com, which you've already heard a bit about. So if I can go to my next slide, please. Our OpsChain product, our OpsChain idea is actually split into two things. So the first is OpsChain Core, and this is a set of tools. This is a set of frameworks, this is a set of architectural standards, which we as developers, which we as computer scientists, software engineers, physicists, etc., we can use to build out applications. So within EY, we've got a huge global development team based in America, here in Europe, over in India, and over in China as well, and Singapore as well, where we are all working to develop the OpsChain Core. And then we can use this OpsChain Core to develop applications, to develop the business applications on top of this, which people can use. And one of the things that we're looking to do is to develop these as products. I've been at EY now for about 3.5, nearly 4 years. And when I joined, we were doing a lot of custom implementation work for clients and customers. Whereas what we're now looking to do instead is to have a set of pre-designed, pre-deployed applications that organizations can very easily use and very easily implement themselves. So if I could go to the next slide, please, Michael. The OpsChain Core itself contains some of these components. So we've got at the core tokens, business tokens. These allow us to represent the fiat currencies that we were talking about earlier, which allow us to pay, and also to represent assets, to represent things, goods. These could be documents, as Michael's going to talk about in a bit. These could be components of a car. These could be a car themselves. These tokens allow us to make representations on a blockchain. The next aspect are around smart contracts. So smart contracts are the logic, the cleverness, the capability that we can build into tokens that Paul was talking about, which enables us to do something. We're not just tracking, we're not just transferring, we've actually got business logic. We've actually got programmable logic we can build into these. And we're looking to create standardized smart contracts, which can all interact with each other for different business applications and also interact with the tokens. So that we've not only got this standard token model, we've also got a standard set of smart contracts to interact with these tokens. We have a hybrid architecture in EY OpsChain as well. This means that it's deployable in multiple different areas. We are committed to public blockchains. We're committed to the Ethereum public blockchain. But there are lots of different ways to integrate with the Ethereum public blockchain. There's lots of different existing enterprise architecture which we need to integrate with in order to allow businesses to make full use of blockchains. And so we have this hybrid architecture which allows us to very modularly, using service-oriented architecture, microservice-oriented architecture, we'll get onto in a minute, to integrate. And then finally, we have Nightfall and more recently Baseline. These are two core and really exciting technologies. So if we go back to our vision that we had, we need to have secure and private transactions. We want to be able to use a public blockchain, but we don't want a business's dealings, workings, ideas, insights being publicly broadcast and visible to all on a public blockchain. Earlier, Paul was talking around the Microsoft royalties platform that we developed. This uses a blockchain to allow Microsoft to calculate how much royalties they need to pay to a game developer when a particular game is purchased. Now that's a fantastic idea, but if we've got multiple game developers on that platform, they'll all be able to see each other's working. They'll be able to see the rights and the royalties that Microsoft are paying. Not ideal. So to that end, we've developed Nightfall and Baseline. Nightfall is a set of technologies which allow us to transfer tokens on a public blockchain with complete privacy and complete security. So you can use a public blockchain infrastructure and you can transfer tokens, you can change ownership of tokens, but only you and the token holder and a third-party auditor, if you want, will have insight and visibility into that. The second is Baseline. Baseline is even more exciting, and our R&D team here in London have done a phenomenal job with industry to create a platform which allows us to use smart contracts under the same privacy technology. So not only can we transfer tokens, but we can also execute business logic using smart contracts on public blockchains under complete privacy, security, and confidentiality. So these core technologies we have here go a huge way to help us deliver our product vision. And I'd really love to stress here that Nightfall and Baseline are completely open source. As Paul was talking around earlier, we don't want to have a controlling stake. We don't want to have controlling influence within blockchains because then you lose all the benefits of decentralization. So these technologies are open source, for people to use, for people to contribute to, for people to view as necessary. So what are we doing with this core technology? If I could get to the next slide, please, Michael. We are developing some core applications. And we've been doing quite a few of these over the years. EY Blockchain Analyzer, Craig has already gone through, so I'm not going to be talking through that one. But then we've also got a set of business applications we're developing as well. So the core ones we have are around supply chain and procurement. This allows you to create orders, to create RFPs, to transact with suppliers in a business ecosystem using blockchain. We'll go into it in a minute. Traceability is another platform that we have and another one of our core ones. And this allows you to track and you trace assets within your supply chain. And these can be financial assets, or these could be, as I was saying, goods, parts, components. We've also developed several other ones as well. So intercompany, contract manager, and tesseract. And these respectively allow you to transact within an organization, to create payments. So the Microsoft royalties example for contract manager. And then tesseract is a platform which allows you to do asset management. On top of these, we've also got tax and compliance tools, which we'll be talking about later. But these allow us to start looking at how we can use blockchain and adhere to tax regulations and how we can really speed that up. And then finally, we have our professional services. And one area that I'd really like just to highlight here is around what we're doing on quality assurance. Now, this allows us to review and give a QA overview of the legal, the technical, the regulatory compliance of blockchain platforms that others may be building, but using the tools that we have developed as part of OpsChain. So we can use the analyzer tools, we can use the blockchain explorer, we can use the smart contract review tool, we can tie that in with our other professional services, with the developers, with the expertise that we have within this technology to give a QA offering on platforms which others may be building, both in the technology, but then also within the wider EY network about the legal and the regulatory compliance as well. So what we really want to do is to make this as easy as possible for organizations to develop and to use. As I was saying earlier, when I joined EY, we were doing a lot of custom implementation work. You know, we would go and we would create customized endpoints. We would spend a huge amount of time integrating blockchain technology into existing systems. This was very time consuming, and we had to do it every time you knew for a different organization. So in order to try and get over that, we've developed and we deployed something called blockchain.ey.com, which people have talked about. So if I could just get to my next slide, please, Michael. Blockchain.ey.com is a way for organizations and individuals to use blockchain products in as simple a way as possible. So we've got multiple ways that people can use the products and services which I've been talking through. We have a web user interface. You can go onto blockchain.ey.com right now. You can sign up and you can start using for free as an individual, the procurement tool, smart contract view, and the analyzer, with more to come as we develop and push them out. This is fantastic for giving people an overview of how these things work, and they can start using them now as well. We're then also very aware that organizations don't want to be logging on to our website in order to do this thing, to use these technologies. So we've got multiple different integration points, RESTful APIs. This is kind of the standard way that a lot of web services developed and built out API endpoints. I'm sure you'll have seen them. I'm sure many people have used them. We've then also got GraphQL. These are slightly more advanced, slightly more modern versions of that. But again, your slightly different technology allow you to integrate into OpsChain and Analyzer. We've then got EDI and XML and ERP connectors. This is looking at some of the more legacy applications that we have, more legacy systems, so that we can still integrate with this. We do not really want blockchain to be replacing any ERP systems. We do not want blockchain replacing many systems. We want them to be able to integrate as easy as possible. And these different integration points here allow us to do that. And then from that, you can use the applications that we have, the OpsChain and the blockchain analyzer. And then these are built on a lot of the foundation services, the core technologies that I was talking about, the token management and deployment, business directories, so you can look up who you're dealing with, so you can have proof and you can have confidence that you know that if you are dealing with a particular company, that you've got a cryptographic proof that that is that company. We've got our smart contracts, which allow you to do logic both privately, securely, and in the clear if you need. We've got all of the excellent analytics work that Craig's been doing, the security and forensic work we've got in SCR, and then a smart contract review, sorry, slipping into acronyms there. And then we've got our tax and compliance work as well. So with all of these foundation services, all of this OpsChain core that we've built these products into, it's very easy to integrate and start using them on blockchain.ey.com. If I could just go to the next slide, we'll just start going into some of the technologies that we have. So smart contract review is part of the assurance suite, part of this analyzer platform that Craig was talking about. And it allows you to analyze for over 87 ERC20 tests and then 58 general tests, looking at the security of the test. So are they secure? Are these smart contracts? Are these token contracts which others have created? Are they secure? Do they work? Have they got high quality? You know, there are coding reviews. If anybody's ever used any tools such as SonarQube, et cetera, for QA work, getting a little bit technical, but it offers that sort of approach, that sort of output, but for smart contracts. If I get to the next slide, we've then also got our supply chain tool. And this is really exciting. So supply chain and procurement. This allows you to go onto the platform and it allows you to contract with another organization. You can put out an RFQ. You can then respond to that RFQ. You can then place your order. That can then be tracked and fulfilled. You can raise an invoice and then payment can be made. This platform allows us, as Paul was saying earlier, to integrate multiple different ERP systems with each other across an ecosystem using VC, using these API endpoints. And it's all running on a public, ideally, or private permission blockchain that we need in order to actually deploy this and to bring these organizations together. And then finally, if our next slide, please, one of sort of it's one of the most fun, it's kind of like the core functionality that you get from blockchain is traceability. We create tokens. These tokens can represent things, data, objects, assets, goods, finance. And then we can track them. Craig's got a fantastic tool in Analyze that allows you to visualize where cryptocurrency has gone. It's exactly the same way. If that doesn't represent a cryptocurrency, it represents a wing nut that eventually makes up a car, or a battery that ends up in a solar farm, or ingredients that end up in drugs and pharmaceuticals. We can use the traceability tools to say exactly where these have gone. And we've done some, and the Italian team have done some absolutely excellent work in food and beverage, tracking mozzarella, tracking wine, tracking chicken throughout supply chains. So you have trust and proof and provenance in where they've come from. You know, for example, in the UK, we had a bit of a problem a while back with the wrong meat being labeled, different meats getting into different supply chains. This tool allows you to have complete visibility as to where that is and to where that goes. So that's the end of the slides that I've got. I'm now going to pass over to Michael to introduce himself. But before I do, just wanted to quickly, just to reiterate, please do go on to blockchain.ey.com, have a go, have a look, see what there is. Please give us feedback. Feedback is hugely important in product development so that we can keep iterating through these tools and building them out better and better. Michael, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sam. So, Michael Schramm, my name. I'm responsible for the blockchain business in Germany, Switzerland, Austria, and it's my pleasure now to tell you about a concrete project that we did with OpsChain. So, as Sam pointed out, OpsChain is a great framework providing tooling and a base for real-life projects. And my job now is to explain you in 10 minutes one of those projects that we do in Germany and Austria at the moment. And this project is called Blockchain Initiative Logistics. And it's the main idea is about this thing I have to grab out of my pocket, because the truck driver typically has some kind of this paper. It's the CMR, it's the freight document that he delivers with him, which stands what kind of goods I'm transporting from where to where. And there are 3 signatures on it to capture, and 2 billion pieces of this paper are created every year in the European Union. And not rarely, they look like this one with a Nutella spot from the breakfast. And they take weeks after the transport to really come into the forwarder or into the carrier's office. But they are very important documents. They are for customs, for taxes, for police, and for invoicing. And the paper-based nature of these documents is, of course, not the best. We are talking about unprofessional handling and handover, weeks waiting after the transport for receiving this paper, data lacking quality and completeness. and fraud and theft can be obscured easily. So the fact to digitalize this kind of paper makes a lot of sense. So what we did is not to create just one piece of software, but we saw this is a use case where a big amount of different companies need to work together. We have transactions cross boundaries of companies. So we brought together, we made a co-creation project with logistics companies, with standardization organization, with some scientific support and interest group. And our mission is to create a decentralized platform for managing those digital freight documents. In the first phase, we are now DB Schenker in Germany and Austria and LKW Walter as the logistics companies who are driving this project. And we have GS1 as an international standardization organization. And together we are creating with some interest groups and scientific support this project. So the benefits of these use cases are obvious. So for shippers and forwarders, it's about reduction of process costs by automation. There is a study from the Netherlands which calculated approximately €4 of potential savings for each CMR. So if you think of having 2 billion of CMRs every year, you can do the maths for the potential of saving here. But we're also talking about proof of delivery in real time. So electronic proof of delivery is really important for companies who needs to be SOX compliant. Anytime access to the status, traceability of the data. So there are many, many obvious benefits for shippers and forwarders. But we're also thinking about APIs towards the government or to service providers like financial institutions, banks, insurances. We are talking with a German insurer at the moment in order to include them into the process of eCMRs in case there are damages or losses and to have access to the data. So that's the obvious benefits of the use case. How far are we? We created last year a pilot. We finished it this February, a pilot which has a smartphone-based handling management of these CMR documents. And there is at all the times and during the life cycle of a CMR, you can find a PDF representation that looks like the original form as public authorities and customers of transportations are typically used to do it. Yeah. By the way, there is a link, we will share it in the chat, the link of a short demo, a 4-minute demo if you want to see how this looks like in reality. One slide about the technology. So our target architecture is based on OpsChain. Let's ask the questions, why blockchain at all? We have typically a situation here that we have different kind of companies who can and need to work together. We have different interests. We have often disputes of different opinions, what the truth is, what the status of the transaction is, what is written on this piece of paper. Somebody took a pen and struck through the 12 pellets and corrected to 10 pellets. When was it done? By whom was it done? Why was it done? And things like that. So we are using blockchain to prove this and to fit all this into a single source of truth. Why are we using OpsChain? And in this case, we use a hybrid version of OpsChain. So we use a private Ethereum OpsChain in order to secure the single transactions during the life cycle. And we're also using a public OpsChain, a public Ethereum notarization in order to allow other parties of this process, stakeholders who are not directly involved into the daily blockchain activities, to also use a neutral validator that was developed by the Technical University of Vienna to validate those PDFs against the blockchain. And that's the reason why we use OpsChain, because OpsChain is already giving us a huge set of technical basic functionality in order to create a software like this in a very short time. So we are very proud that we won also some Future Zone awards. We had got a lot of good press. You see some happy faces of people from DB Schenker and GS1 and LKW Walter and the University of Economy and others. So we had a lot of press. And where are we now? We are now boarding for phase 2. This week, our phase 2 starts. We are open for any logistics companies, industry companies with significant international transports. So we are now in the phase 2, starting phase 2 for scaling and maturing our product for production. And this is the second thing. It's not only about creating a software, it's also about creating a commercial platform in the future. So our idea is to have this decentralized platform idea, not only working for single companies, but that there is a platform so that here this can really create a market standard, that this can create a new business model in this decentralized way. And that's the main idea where these blockchain general ideas come through based on EY OpsChain. So this was about my project here. In the following minutes, we will have then after 1 p.m. CET, have some breakout sessions. If you want to learn more about real projects of our region and some lessons learned that we did, and if you also want to validate in an interactive sessions, I can invite you for breakout 4, where we'll discuss more concrete use cases and projects that we did based on EY OpsChain. So that was from the Build project. I will hand now back to the Q&A sessions. And
Thank you very much, Michael. I've just shared with the group, everyone, your breakout number 4, where you also find the meeting ID and the password from Michael's session. We have a Q&A part now, and we have questions coming up from all kind of areas, starting with you, Michael, and maybe Sam answering the ones regarding your session. We have one from Jill, and the question is, for supply chain application, goods cross borders, how do you get custom authorities to provide the data to allow the tracking of goods, which often triggers the payment for the goods delivered? So I think that's a good question for you, Michael, if you would be willing to answer this.
I try to answer it. So how do you, the question is, how do we receive data or get data from the customs or from these authorities? At the moment, we do not get them. At the moment, we get the data from the forwarders or the shippers who are really creating these freight documents. So these are the initial companies, organizations who have all the data together in an SAP or in a transport management system. At the moment, we are basing the information from there, and we are creating documents and we are managing documents based on that information. And this is the evidence, and this is a document that those companies then use for the customs and for the customs declaration as an evidence, especially afterwards, after the transport is finished. This is then the evidence of the transport. Yeah, we do not yet receive data from the public authorities, if this was the question, but we are in a future phase planning to discuss with authorities, and we are now already in the discussion with ministries how this kind of handshaking and kind of checks and control they might need could work.
Thank you very much, Michael. We have another question for Greg. It's from Willy Leibner, and the question is, in order to accelerate mass adoption of blockchain for both individual and enterprises, how would you assess the importance of human readable crypto addresses making transactions easier? Not for the blockchain explorer itself, as it's kind of anonymous, but kind of a protocol being implemented in wallets and exchanges. So basically a similar thing on what HTTP did for the internet. Greg, are you able to answer this question?
So I think if I understand the question right, I think this is all about tagging and connecting essentially off-chain data with the on-chain data to bring it to life. Now, of course, we don't do that today for the Bitcoin Explorer, and we just look at the on-chain data. But of course, you can imagine how you could connect the addresses or the transactions and annotate them, so to speak, to bring it to life. And you could certainly do that in a supply chain example. So I hope that goes some way to answering the question.
Thanks, Greg. Here's another one. You just mentioned the Bitcoin Explorer. So Pradivdisam Naidu is asking, for enterprise implementation, how would participants of a network be able to visualize other participants' name when only public addresses are visible in this Bitcoin Explorer? Is there a way to map the public addresses to a readable name on the Explorer for clarity of viewing?
So yet again, if I understand the question right, then it will. And we've done a lot of research in this space when we were looking at analyzing zero knowledge proof transactions on the Ethereum network, and ultimately it all comes down to what is the view that your company has of that data. So, for example, if you were able to share the data across multiple the companies, then you can bring the visualization to life by annotating it with the company names, for example. But ultimately, it will come down to what data have you got in your almost traditional database that connects it to the on-chain data, and then you can piece it together that way. But it will ultimately depend on how much data you have across the entire landscape. Yeah.
I think it's answering the question. There's already a thank you coming, so thanks for this. Michael, I can always hear you. You can now answer the next one if you like. Peter Scher is asking, when transferring the whole supply chain of, say, a chocolate bar or a cup of coffee onto the blockchain, cacao and coffee is often farmed in developing countries. Does every link have to have the infrastructure in place to transfer the whole supply chain onto the blockchain, or could, for example, Nestle initiate it and upload the required info?
So the question, as I understand the question, is about where do the data come from that we put in such a system. Yeah. So the question is, and this is a case-by-case answer, how detailed is the access to data in all of the steps of the supply chain? If we're thinking about a product chain where something's produced and it's has several steps inside until it's in the supermarket in a packaged way, then some of these steps will have the contributors, the producers, to give their data via an API, via some scanning, via some Internet of Things means. And in some situation, it's more the central producer, whatever the big enterprise is, who is responsible for a product. So it's hard to answer that. And this is, by the way, a project that we made in Italy with a blockchain wine. In case there is one production company that owns a lot of the process of the production, then typically it's more from this company coming. If it's a production process with very few steps spread over a huge number of producers, some of them might be part of the chain and some not. So this is a case-by-case answer.
Thank you very much, Michael. So I'm looking now if there are still open questions. I cannot find any. I have answered all of them. Maybe if Darko or Jit are still in the call, there was a question from Radik is really asking how the European Commission is currently looking into controlling kind of the crypto assets, kind of as a framework. I answered that we are currently looking into it with the European Commission. What is the European Commission currently doing so around the crypto asset framework? Darko, Jit, are you still in the call?
Yes, I am still on the call, and hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
Maybe you would like to answer kind of the question. Yeah. So maybe tell us a little bit about the crypto asset framework that is currently already published, but is currently still ongoing development, I guess. Huh?
Yeah, and I think that's the key point, really. It's an ongoing development, and it's an interesting point because what the EU basis seems to be is that if it has a similar risk to some of the other current assets already, then it should be regulated in a similar way. And for those of you who are following it closely, you might have also seen MiCA, which is the crypto asset equivalent of MiFID. I've been sadly been old enough to remember when MiFID came in the first place in 2007, and it was a big deal, right, for even the banks and the financial institutions. And so MiCA will be a potentially big deal as well. But I think also there's a big opportunity for firms to use this to show their ability and to show their ability, and their to sort of meet the demands of the customer and to show that they're there on the side of the customer as well.
Very
Darko,
good,
I don't know whether you're on the call. Oh. No.
He's muted. I'm not sure if Darko still wants to mention something. Maybe he's already preparing his breakout. As you are seeing the links in the chat, we are basically having a nice breakout. This breakout number 1, where you can listen a little bit more about it. And Darko, the one which is now muted, he's probably already preparing. We have basically answered all your 14 questions so far in the chat. If anything else is coming up or you still want to write us questions, we would basically follow up with an email in the end. I would like to say or open the discussion for everyone, maybe that is still here. If you would like to speak with us in the Q&As are now open. You can basically speak up if you like. I think the host has adjusted this one. We are going otherwise over into our breakouts at 1 today. They are all 1 hour long, and you have 4 different types. Maybe we can show them quickly. So the first one is regarding the tokenization of assets. We have recently published a paper here, Darko and his team. So it's a very nice, interesting perspective, mainly focusing on Swiss market, but also EMEIA. That's a webcast, so you have to pre-register. Here you find the link, but you still can register if you like. Then you have 3 breakouts with Zoom, where you find the direct links in the chat already. So breakout number 2 is a Zoom breakout. It's Trust and Blockchain, where you will hear a little bit more deeper insights about the blockchain analyzer. Greg has basically tapped into a little bit today. And you have a nice panel discussion with 2 startups speaking about their perspective when it comes to transparency and trust. Then you have breakout number 3, which is a breakout focusing on HR and talent perspective. So we're looking into how can we recognize our employees' behavior and engagement in the future, where blockchain is only one emerging technology of all of it. And we have recently launched a module here and showcasing this. Then we have breakout number 3 with Michael and his team. And they're basically looking and discussing several regional use cases and validating those. So please find the links in the chat if you want to enter. And additionally, there comes one last question from Killian. Maybe we are asking it to someone of the panelists who wants to answer. And the question from Killian is, are there legal burdens for tokenization of physical assets like art? This would be a nice question for Benny. Darko, yeah, it would also be a nice question for you, but you're still muted. Paul, would you like to answer this question? No one wants to answer the question.
I would love to answer the question, but I don't think that I know the answer. So unfortunately,
Killian, you have to join the breakout number 1. It's breakout number 1, because this is exactly the breakout where Darko and Benjamin will speak about it. And we have basically have the project, it's called OpsChain, where we basically do this already. So if you are really interested to hear more, please join breakout number 1 at 1:00 today. That would be cool.
That's in 24 minutes, right?
That's in 24 minutes. Thank you very much. That's super cool. So, and for everyone else that is now still not hungry yet and wants to wait online, I want to share with all of you a video from one of our EY colleagues. He's a YouTuber, and I've just shared this in the link. You could also click on the next slide, so potentially you would see him on a picture. No, you see first all of us. Thank you very much. So this is our panelists, the speakers. Maybe click to the next slide. There you see the external speakers. And then you go to the last session we are offering, which is basically our transition part. Kieran is an EY consultant, but he has an independent opinion to share with you on DeFi and Ethereum 2.0. He's a kind of YouTube blogger since quite a while before joining EY and now still doing it. So it's really independent. It's not an EY perspective, it's a Kieran perspective. And he will give you all these insights from the Swiss market. I've shared the video in the chat. We will not streamline it here because we leave the screen with the breakouts for you as last screen for today. And we say thank you to all of you and hear you soon in 23 minutes after you hopefully watched Kieran's cool video. Thank you very much, guys. That's Kieran. Yeah, go to our DeFi guide and listen to him. That's very cool. And hopefully see you at 1. Also my breakout, which is breakout number 3. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Bye, guys.